everyone. Good evening. How are you on this rainy Tuesday that feels like a Monday, but it's way better because Staceyann and Rachel are here. So, right? I'm very excited about it. My name is Christina Nguyen-Scott, and I'm the executive director of the Greene Space here at WNYC, New York Public Radio. It is a true pleasure to have you with us. This evening, Staceyanns' residency will begin with us with a reflection of home. Now, Staceyann will be here all week, tonight, tomorrow night, and Friday. So come back and hang out with her. She's bringing all different types of friends and collaborators in the space. So as she reflects on home, she's really asking questions like, how do we carry home with us? How do we find it as we move across borders? What are some of the practices we have to institute in order to find balance, calm, and safety? This residency would not be possible if it were not for the generous support from the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation. And I'm so pleased to share that Alex Sanger from the foundation is here with us. Thank you so much for your support. We would not be able to do this. Please, thank you. Additional support for the Greene Space Artist in Residence program is provided by the Jerome L. Greene Foundation, the MetLife Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. So let me tell you a little about Staceyann, because I come from Jamaica too, you know. On a ramp with me, I know her for a long time. So I'm more excited. So Staceyann is a poet, actor, and performing artist. She has been an out poet and political activist since 1998. From the Nuyorican Poets Cafe to one-woman shows off-Broadway to acting in Julie Taymor's Across the Universe and performing in both stage and film versions of Howard Zinn's Voices of a People's History of the United States to starring in Tony-nominated Def Poetry Jam on Broadway. Chin credits the long list of things she has done to her grandmother's hard-working history and the pain of her mother's absence. She has appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show and 60 Minutes, to name a few, and her poetry has been featured in the New York Times and the Washington Post, also to name a few. She's the author of her memoir, The Other Side of Paradise, and Crossfire, a collection of her poetry. Staceyann proudly identifies as Caribbean, Black, Asian, lesbian, woman, and resident of New York City and a Jamaican national. So, okay, on in feet. Let me tell you a little bit about Rachel Cargle. Rachel Cargle is an Akron, Ohio-born writer, entrepreneur, and philanthropic innovator. Her work and upcoming book with Penguin Random House centers the reimagining of womanhood, solidarity, and self, and how we are in relationship with ourselves and one another. In 2018, she founded the Loveland Foundation, Inc., a nonprofit offering free therapy to Black women and girls. Rachel is a regular contributor to Cultured Magazine, Atmos Magazine, and The Cut, and has been featured in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the New Yorker. Rachel lives and loves in Brooklyn, New York. Please join me in giving them a big up, on a welcome them to the stage, Staceyann Chin and Rachel Cargle.
All right. How are we going to start this now? Do you want to,
I'll go first.
They gave a whole bio before, so we don't really need
To talk about ourselves.
to talk about ourselves so much.
I'm excited that this is your residency and that you are. Oh, do I need it more? Thanks.
I'm not checking my Instagram. I just have my questions on my phone.
The topic of your residency. First, thank you all for being here. It's so great to be in person. It's so great to see people. It's so great. It's just so great overall. Okay. I want to start with asking you why, when you came into this residency, they asked what you wanted to talk about, and you were very clear that you wanted to have a conversation about home. So I want to ask, why home and why now?
That's like the whole hour, right? I think that, Derek Walcott, who I don't always agree with his politics, and certainly not his politics around women, he always said you could sum up his work, about palm trees and nostalgia and missing home. And I think for many of us who are immigrants, especially those of us who come to the U.S. with one notion of what we would find, and then find something else here. I think those of us are always struggling with what it means to be home in a place like America. And you add being Black or being queer or being, an activist or a leftist or not a Republican to the mix, and then it becomes like a very complicated, gnarly conversation about belonging and home. And I think growing up, I didn't have dreams of coming to America like a lot of people maybe did. I was working really hard to find home and belonging inside of the culture, inside of the society of Jamaica. I knew that I was born poor, and I was going to be able to pass through the ranks of education and become a member of society that was valuable. I was light-skinned enough to not think that I couldn't do it in a place like Jamaica. I was, articulate enough to know that it mattered, so I could slip into the upper class quite easily because I mastered the language well enough. And then when I came out as a lesbian, it was like, holy fuck, I can't exactly move so swiftly into Jamaican society. So I had to find somewhere else to be. And so I felt as if it was a kind of exile, even though it was self-imposed. I felt as if being in America was a sort of exile. And then I also imagined that I was going to be, frolicking down Fifth Avenue, the meadows of Fifth Avenue.
You talked about
as a lesbian.
The idea of, you can grab your poem from there. You talked about the idea of what it would be. What did you think it would be? What did you think America would be when you got here?
I don't know. I read a James Baldwin, and I suppose when you're young, I read Lorraine Hansberry. I read, all of these writers who had presented New York as a hard place, but it was beautiful and nostalgic and full of Renaissance. And so even if you didn't belong downtown, there was Harlem. And even if you didn't fit into Manhattan, there was Brooklyn. And so I felt like I would belong here. I would, and I was gay. I mean, being gay meant that you could belong in New York, and so I didn't really find that. I came here and I didn't expect to miss Jamaica so much. That's the other thing, because I was like, fuck all them bitches. Can I say that? I was like, I'm done with Jamaica. Jamaica is outdated, it's barbaric, it's over, it's done. I'm going to these, enlightened New York people where I was going to be, an equal member of society. And then I came here and they were like, Black. Why you talk so funny, child? I'm talking so much about being an immigrant, and I'm very aware that that for the African American,
we talk about it a lot.
Yeah, home is.
When I come to visit in Jamaica, I get so riled up when white people are around. I came here to have this experience where I'm not confronted with these things that bother me so much, and Staceyann doesn't think about it much. The people who are from Jamaica just don't seem to have the same visceral reaction to whiteness that I do, and you often speak to it being an African American specific experience, about that intensive visceral reaction to white people.
Indeed. And I think that being in Jamaica, I think I grew up, it's a very strange experience to come here and for everyone to talk about white women as being the standard of beauty. Because in Jamaica, though whiteness is one of the criteria for beauty, it has to be mixed with blackness for it to be of value in Jamaica. So white women, I mean, like as a kid in school, we would laugh at the one girl with blonde hair and say her hair looked like cane trash.
Oh my God.
I know, it's quite, so you see how you
Yes,
feel
I
sympathy
know.
for the white girl, which never happens for you. We had this song, like growing up, she was mad thin, so we had like, all MAGA gal, Red Dragon have a nickname for them, kukumkum. That's the sound of bones knocking together because you are so undesirable.
Wowie.
Right, I mean, and then we have the song Under My Fat Ting, Me Under My Fat Ting, which is a celebration of the rounded flesh. So growing up here, growing up in Jamaica, I was never sexy being tiny. It was only when I landed in America that I became beautiful being like a skinny person. So whiteness, though they had the money and they had the power, of course, that is kind of global, whiteness never controlled the cultural space of beauty. And I don't want to oversimplify by making it sound like Jamaica is a place that loves blackness and hates whiteness, because the blackness they love has to be mixed with whiteness in some way or some order of whiteness, whether it's Indianness or Chineseness. So there's a general appreciation for approximation, or at least some part of whiteness has to be mixed in to kind of lessen the blackness to have greater value. So it's complicated, but white girls were never the pretty girls. I remember my cousin, Alicia's mom, she was like always with this guy that everybody didn't think was a good guy for her. And so the conversations that they would have behind her back is like, I don't know what's wrong with this girl. Look how she fat and nice. What's she doing with this man? So she had currency because she had the round flesh. So they didn't understand why she was with this loser when she was fat enough to find a nice man, So, but I never. So when I came here, I've been a professional lesbian for about 2.5 decades now. And I've never dated a white woman. I mean, not because, I don't think that white women are dateable, but there's so many black women who are like fly. There's so many of them that I kind of get around to, and like they back me up on walls, and I have no choice but to participate in whatever they're like insisting. I feel like it's my duty as a black lesbian to participate in these things.
I love this for you, Andy.
And since we have an open relationship, it's okay.
Yes, I love this for you. I have another question, but if you had something. But
I'm supposed to have a...
No, I can go with mine because I was prepared.
No. I'm ready. It's just that it's on the phone. I know that you are in the moment.
I'm so nervous. We didn't talk about any of these questions. I'm very nervous.
I know that you're in the moment kind of like wrangling, narratives from your childhood. And, coming to terms with the fact that some things you believed before and some things are shifting now, and kind of reorganizing how your brain worked to change narratives to make your survival possible. And I wonder, now that you've gone through all of that and you've thought about all of that, did you feel at home as a kid, or did you or even in retrospect, can you feel that feeling of being at home, or do you now think that it was you were? I mean, did you feel like you belonged as a kid?
I don't think I felt like I belonged for many reasons. One, because I was often the only black girl in my all-white classroom, in my all-white soccer team, and my all-white Girl Scout troop. So I didn't have a lot of space to feel like I was included in the community there, even though no one was particularly mean or dismissive of me, and I wasn't able to pick up on microaggressions much. I've been writing about this one particular experience where I was in maybe second grade, and all of my friends were sitting around me, and my big sister must have done my hair that morning with some grease and put it back in a ponytail, and I had taken my ponytail out for whatever reason during playtime, and my friends were like molding my hair into a Christmas tree shape, like a cone, and they were singing, my maiden name is Brooks, so I was Rachel B. There was always another Rachel, so I was Rachel B. And they were going around me singing this song, like, "Oh Christmas Tree," but they were singing "Oh Rachel B." And it was like this wild experience of just these white kids playing in my hair. And I don't even remember what I felt, but now in retrospect, I'm like, girl, get up. Like, don't let them use your literal body as entertainment for them during like playtime right now. And so I had lots of those experiences that I only recognize in retrospect that certainly must have given me a feeling of distance. But I think that with the feelings that I'm feeling now, where I'm having all of these very emotional realizations, these truths, these memories that are coming up for me that I do not at all remember from elementary school or even through high school. And I'm recognizing that I had told myself a lot of stories to maintain my survival that weren't true, about how everything was fine and I was doing well and nothing was really wrong. And so I think that I was less at home than I was able to admit, perhaps. But when I did get the chance to leave, I think I immediately took off in search of something that felt more familiar and felt more true than what my environment, thinking about school and sports and things like that. And also my family, because I have so many memories in my childhood of being told, Rachel, you just think you're better than everyone else, or being made fun of for how articulate I spoke, which was something I was very proud of. I would spend my summer days I would have memories of laying in my bedroom, just practicing my handwriting, practicing saying large vocabulary words, because it was of interest to me. It was nothing that I was trying to be better than. It was just of interest of me. So I think that I had a lot of feelings of displacement. And once I moved into adulthood, I was kind of grappling to build that around me in ways that I didn't have it.
And do you think you've come to a place where home is more accessible to you as an idea, as a reality, as a feeling?
I think community is more so than it's ever been. I think that I still have maybe a longer way to go to really solidify what home is for me, since I don't necessarily find it still back in, where I grew up. It still kind of feels blurry to me. Maybe it's in this moment of discovery. I'm still trying to get clarity on the pieces to say, okay, this is what home was, or this is what home is. But since we've been together, you've been such a huge example of community for me, and you've shown me so many ways that community can exist, perhaps should exist, and it's given me a huge blueprint for being intentional over these years. I'm 33. It feels like during my 20s, I was just trying to build my career and see what city I wanted to live in and have whatever fun I wanted to have. And now I'm in a space of what are the tools that I need to have and implement to make sure that I'm building a community around me that will stand over many, many years. Can I go with my next question?
Yeah.
So much of what you said in answering the first question was these things that you had realizations about home for you, about how Jamaicans felt, your misconceptions about what America would be like. How has that played into your decision to bring your 10-year-old daughter Zuri back to Jamaica, who she's been there in school for a year now? She's left her school in Brooklyn, been living in Jamaica, been in relationship with her school community there, with her family and friend community there. What was some of your intention in bringing her?
Language is important to me, I think. And I wanted her, those of us who live away from the Caribbean community, one of the things that we miss more than anything is the sound of our accents and the way that language is used. And, you know, now that you've spent time there, you know what I mean when I say, you know, the poorest of person, the least educated of persons, you know, has a dexterity with language that you don't expect, because we tell stories and we make jokes and there's a lot of double entendre, and, you know, like, there's a bunch of like stories that you tell and you have to misuse words, and it's all a part of how language is used and how laughter is provoked and how our shared history is tapped into. And, you know, I always spoke Patois to Zuri from the moment she was born, you know, and I make a point of doing it, like, you know, in complicated ways, so that she was never without understanding in Patois. But
now
she didn't use it. She didn't use the language, so she never spoke it. She understood it, and the only time she spoke it was when she wanted to kind of like impress someone, or she wanted to perform a bit, and she knew that it was either funny or quirky or interesting for her to say something Jamaican, and when she said one or two words, everybody would like erupt into laughter. And there was something performative about it, the way that we would, you know, perform it. I'm looking at you because, you know, you know, I'm assuming you're not Jamaican. So there's a way that we use the language, you know, in this kind of push and pull. But she never used it, never ever used it. And it just dug under my skin every day. I would be like, you know, even when we see each other, well, go on. I mean, we would say things that we wouldn't normally say at home because we just want a chance to perform the language, to hear it, to feel it, to live inside of it. And a year and a half later, she, after having lived in Jamaica, I hear her saying it just by use of language. You know, I hear her calling her friends or saying, no, she doesn't want to, but she uses patois to communicate that, not as a way of performing, but as a way of communicating. And I don't think I could buy that anywhere. I think that's one of the things, and that's symbolic of maybe me wanting her to belong to Jamaica in a way that I worried she wouldn't if she never spent any living time there. You know, she would eat some things Jamaican. Now she eat everything Jamaican. Now she, even when she don't like it, she just know it's dinner. And she just knows, so, you know what, it's not my favorite dish, but I'm going to eat it because it's dinner, in the way that when I make food here or order food here, she just eat it because it's dinner. Whereas before, if it was something that she wasn't familiar with, that was Jamaican, she would be like, no, I don't want it, or no, I don't feel like that. And, you know, and she's, you know, her tolerance for spicy has gone up. You know, she be outside barefoot now. You know, when she just came, she was like gingerly walking over the earth, you know, like very uncomfortable with bugs. Now she's like getting bug bitten all the time. And she just knows it's like, just, you know, I live in the tropics, so we get bitten by bugs and you just move quickly. You know, when she got there, she would be like, oh, you know, Jamaicans are so judgy. And I would be like, I would be like, you know, it's not judgy, it's just a way of like, you know, speaking or knowing. And now she's full throttle.
The judgiest little one.
She's full throttle in the business of being like, no, that's not appropriate for wearing out. Whether we agree with it or not, she now understands the Jamaican culture from a place of experience. And no one will take that from her. No one will ever be able to take that from her. No one will ever tell her that she doesn't belong to Jamaica, because she would have had this year of memory and, you know, belonging.
And she's very proud of it. When we have visitors, she loves to let them know what they don't know about Jamaican culture, even history lessons about who the colonizers were.
I know. When we protested,
yes,
you know, Kate and William came to Jamaica,
yes.
and we protested, you know, heavily, and she was the only kid at the protest, and so of course the media bum rushed her, so she was on everything, and she had just, you know, like been in the throes of learning about
the social studies.
The social
lesson.
studies, like who came to Jamaica and when the British took over and what they did to the
So she was livid
natives
at this
and
point.
what the Queen did and how and the Governor General and what is the structure of government. And she was just ready when they asked her, so do you think? She was like, well, I don't think that they have any. I can't even tell you how many things they did to black people. And it was used on
Many media
all
outlets.
of the media outlets, all of the white boy news people here in the U.S. used the clip of her saying shit. So it was nice. It was nice, and I took great pleasure in like being able to say Kate and William. Never the titles because And she had her sign that says, "Prince and princesses belong only in fairy tales, not in Jamaica." I was like, go ahead, girl. She was ready for them, So I have a question, about loss.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So, I lost my parents from the get-go. They left me when I was born. My father never showed up, and my mother left, moments after I was born and never really came back to me. There was a way that your mom was very present with you, but because she had a disability, she couldn't be what you imagined the other parents were to their children, being able to be mobile and up and about and lift them and carry them and go everywhere and carry their bags for them and whatnot. You did a lot of that for your mom growing up. And then your dad died when you were 11. And I know he was like really important to you and he was kind of like a cool guy. Your mom often talks about how much he looked like Marvin Gaye.
She does talk about that. That was her goal.
So I wonder how do you feel losing your dad at 11 and kind of never feeling as if you could like dash off and leave your mom and find your way out in the world, even like just generally because you had to stay close to her. How does that affect your understanding of yourself and the spaces you take up and the spaces you call yours?
The language that you're using brings up both physical loss and the idea of losing my father. But one thing that you and I have been talking about are things that have been coming into realization for me in really big ways, particularly just witnessing you raise Zuri in such close proximity, is...
Especially after you had decided, I don't want no children.
We'll talk about that later. Staceyann, if Zuri makes a sound, Staceyann will leap to her to see what's wrong, what happened, how are you feeling? And it made me think of ways that my mother, who had polio, she was on crutches since she was 5, so my whole life I only knew a disabled mother. I never got ran to. She couldn't. And I was thinking about ways where I would be outside playing and I would maybe skid my knee or something like that, and I would have to collect myself and bring myself to my mother to be cared for. But I don't have any memories of my mother. We lived in a 2-story townhouse in a Section 8 apartment complex, so it was what my mom could afford, but it wasn't best for her disability. So my mom spent all of these years keeping us in this good school system, moving up and down stairs in ways that she wasn't best for her. So I just have memories of my mom had already gone downstairs to get someone else ready for school or to get ready for her day, and I would be sick and I'd be throwing up, and my mom just couldn't come check on me. She'd be like, okay, let me know what you need. I'll try to get it to you when I get to you. And so I'm having such a rush of emotions witnessing Staceyann parenting Zuri, because I'm seeing all of the things that I didn't have the opportunity to experience, but that I had told myself it was okay.
And I'm also on fleek because I didn't get it either. So
yes,
I'm like,
so she's going through all of
you know?
her, she's overboard with it. And I'm like grieving in real time things that my mother wasn't able to do for me. And when my father passed away, I was his, from what I believed, his favorite person. There was no one else on the planet he thought was as interesting or cute or funny as I was. And so he gave me, and maybe now it just came to my head right now, maybe he was like overcompensating for what he knew perhaps I wasn't getting from my mom. But
So you're saying you're with someone who's kind of like your dad?
yeah, I'll talk to my therapist about it tomorrow. But I, once he passed away and I became essentially my mother's partner, because there were things that she wasn't able to get from my father, he wasn't there anymore, and I had to show up. I think that right now the biggest feeling of loss is the loss of some aspects of childhood that I didn't get. And that is in some ways a bigger loss than perhaps my father passing away or my mother having a disability, because obviously so much of our emotionality and our understanding of ourselves in the world is shaped during those years. And so around the topic of loss, I think that right now what I'm feeling my biggest loss is what that younger version of me didn't get, that she deserved to have that care and have that consideration, but it just wasn't accessible to me for a variety of reasons. And that grieving is some of the hardest grieving I've been through in my life so far, I think.
And what do you how do you think that shapes the nest you build for yourself now as home, in terms of the people you want to negotiate, the things you don't want to do, the ways in which you are fiercely
Go
defensive?
say what you want to say about it.
No, just
I think I'm fiercely defensive. I think I'm fiercely independent.
No, defensive of like the space you create
right,
for home,
so,
the space you build for home.
Yeah, I'm fiercely independent in that space, and I'm fiercely defensive of what I consider my home now, because I had no say in what it felt like growing up in like major ways. And when I would be like, Zuri, what would you like to eat today? And I'd be like, she can eat what we're eating. Like, she can eat where we're at. Like, I was so triggered by how much space Zuri was given to just exist in the world, because it was so far from anything I understood about how children were able to live and exist. And so my ideas have definitely opened about what it can be and what it can feel like. But my fierce independence, it's really frustrating when your trauma response is also the thing that makes you do well in the world. The fact that I had to gain this fierce independence has propelled me to build the things that I have built and to live in the world the way that I have lived. And so I'm really, really grappling with giving myself space to be soft and not feeling like I'm losing the best parts of me. And that is shaping how I'm able to show up in our home, in my own independent space, my relationship with my mother. It's hard, like very hard.
But you're doing
and you've been
so
such a great partner in holding me in these spaces, because I like unravel sometimes with the weight of the conversations.
But it's the process of like building and making community with people. Like, you can't be close to people without them seeing all your shit. Friendships don't grow if every single time you're having friends over Sophia, you gotta like clean the house completely before they come. Yes, I'm talking to you. People have to come over and like see your mess, and then like for it to be all right. And for you to be reminded or to learn that you ain't gotta be a specific way for people to love you. I know I'm sounding mad guru right now, but I got my own shit that's probably coming up soon.
I think that I'm learning so much from you about, I think you're so vulnerable in some ways. I always say that Staceyann is the most human being I've ever known. She feels the range of emotions, is in connection with the range of ways that humans can be connected. And it has convinced me that maybe there's some safety there. Maybe I can and I won't completely evaporate from the planet if I gave a little space for vulnerability. But the crazy thing is that I thought I was vulnerable. I truly, in my brain, was like, wow, I'm out here being the most vulnerable one out here. You're welcome, everyone. And then I started dating Staceyann, and I'm like, I know nothing. There was,
who she's talking about.
There was so much about how I was existing in the world that has unfolded from just witnessing someone do it. We give each other, you give it to me, we give it to each other, you all give it to the people in your world, permission to expand when we do it ourselves.
For sure. I mean, but I always say to you that I think every trait has an upside and a downside.
Yeah.
You're being independent or very boundaried has its upsides and its downsides, and me being vulnerable and available to the world all the time has its downsides as well. One of the things that I'm learning from you is that in order to create safety in a home, you have to be able to define the boundaries. You have to be able to say to people, yes, Sophia, you cannot come over. You can't come over today because we are doing something that, and being Caribbean and Jamaican.
Staceyann, I will wake up in the morning and she'll be like, we have 55 guests downstairs and they're going to be staying for the next 5 to 6 business weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, I was not emotionally prepared for this. She's like, isn't it so great? And I'm like, not particularly, but let's see how it goes.
Okay, on to the next topic. How has being a writer and an
I think
activist...
it was my turn, but go ahead.
Yeah, we should just go ahead.
Okay.
How has being a writer and an activist expanded your ideas of home?
I think that mostly in my studies, to be able to do this work, I've been able to read about other people who have had similar heartbreaking experiences as me and other people in my world, and recognizing that sometimes it is that knowledge of how hard things can be for yourself and others that propels you to do this type of work, to be standing aside someone because you know that that type of grit that comes from surviving whiteness, surviving capitalism, surviving the patriarchy, surviving poverty is what propels you to care so much about bringing everyone along with you. So I think that reading memoirs and reading and listening to interviews and reading interviews has been the best part of becoming an activist and becoming an author in this way, because it has completely shattered the very limited, very whitewashed idea that I have of what people are, how people relate. Even being in Jamaica, I've been there back and forth mostly for the last year, and witnessing the way community looks outside of America's idea of what community looks completely shapeshifts my idea of the world and allows me to move into different crevices and to move into it in different ways that I didn't know were possible because I hadn't seen it. And so to answer your question, I think that being an activist, it actually was at the forefront of it in the learning and in the studying of people and seeing how they loved, seeing how they survived motherhood and their mothers, seeing how they entered into becoming mothers and moving into the world in really meaningful ways. Mm-hmm. The learning of it, the study of it has been particularly transformative for me.
Do you think your parents' idea of home and community and belonging is still with you, or do you think it's shifted dramatically from what they thought it was?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad had a bigger idea of community because I have memories of my dad used to take me to the pool hall with him He just wanted me there. Like, he just always wanted me with him. So I remember seeing him have friends. My mother, I tell the story all the time that we lived in the suburbs, and when people would be like, why are you living all the way out here? She would be like, because I don't want anyone to tell me that they were just going by. Like, there's no way that no one's just passing by all the way out here in the suburbs. Like, she was so insular in that way, unless you could really like control the narrative of what the community was. So I think even now in my 30s, I'm still learning what community looks like and feels like, and how it looks and feels comfortable for me, because it certainly doesn't reflect how my mother felt, and I didn't have as much time with my dad to really fortify me in that way.
Yeah, it's funny how you say that, because Gwen, like, she's so welcoming.
Gwen's my mom.
Of people in her house, you know, certainly of me and Zuri. She's like, she cooks for us. She and Zuri be cooking shit, be drawing, like puzzles. Like, when we visit, it's, you know. I
think she's changed. I think my mother had a terminal cancer diagnosis in 2020, and having like it changes you when you have a moment of consideration that you might not be here anymore. Her daughter started dating girls. Her daughter had a career that she had never witnessed. I moved to New York City. There's like all of these things that my mom had to shapeshift if she was going to be in community with me. And so I think that opened many doors for her. And I'm very excited for the ways that even now at 74, my mom is she came down and visited us in Jamaica a few weeks ago. It was her first time ever out of the country. It was her first passport ever, her first passport stamp. And
we made the farm completely accessible because your mom was coming.
Yes, and so we had like ramps put in, and it was a huge moment for her to be out of the country, see me in a new relationship, in a new space, and I'm happy for her. I'm very happy for the unexpected ways that she's experiencing new things at a time where she didn't even think she'd be here for it, and then at an age where people don't normally expect to have anything new and exciting.
So I wrote this poem today.
She literally wrote it in the car on the way here. I haven't heard it.
You know, it's unedited. You ready? You know, you've been talking about how the relationship with me has changed you and made your life different. And, you know, some of this we'll talk about my perspective on that. So forgive me if it's not smooth. For the white people. I know, you know, white people who take themselves too seriously cannot exist in a world where we're interrogating whiteness. So just chill and laugh with me more. Just know that I'm not trying to like, you know, take your good hair. I'm not trying to tan you up too much. You know, it's just really about like, you know, always acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is the whiteness. You know, even as you come as an ally, it's like mad fucking difficult for us to be in space with you because, you know, like, you know, you have to be working hard to make a point that, listen, I'm on your side, and we're like side-eyeing you, but still trying to be fucking human with you in the context of whiteness in America. So just like shake up and like move around in your drawers and just relax and be like, you know what, we are in it together, and like all of us have to like make some shifting and some, you know, all of that. And I'm deeply grateful for the people who can sit through it, because I've been in many, many rooms where motherfuckers just leave. They just take their lack of melanin and just walk. So, just like you have to pat the man who is like, you know, feminism, you have to pat the white person who is like, yes, I'm in the fight, I'm staying even when I'm deeply uncomfortable. You know, my grandmother always says, encouragement sweetens labor, and this work against anti-racism and all that is damn hard work wherever you are. Except it's harder for some people, so just remember that, Karens. You can't really laugh so deeply giggly. You can't enjoy it so much. Ready?
Yep.
You nervous?
A little bit.
Okay. When I was 9, I pissed on the artifice of playing house, vowed never to cavort with dolls with empty gazes. Truth be stated, I only ever had one doll, really. A giant pink elephant in the room my mother left me and my brother after she visited. We were ejected, sent away from our grandmother after she abandoned us the first time. Me, just born. As you would say, I was still a squishy worm left under the rock of my grandmother's poverty. I came too early, without my mother's acquiescence. I tumbled down the conduit of her unwilling flesh and survived a decade without dolls, without playing house, without any small talk because my grandmother was deaf and my brother did not suffer idle chatter. So when we talked, we mostly talked about death and the brutality of God's mysterious favors. And how could God have blessed us with a mother who had so thoroughly forgotten us? So when she came back, after nearly a decade, my longing was vindicated because she had become the forgiven prodigal returned to claim her children. Except she didn't. She only came back to collect. She'd never come back to collect us. She'd only come to sort her alien resident papers because the northern countries of North America maps a cruel wilderness without legal documentation. We might as well be homeless, belonging to no one but ourselves. Anyways, when she arrived with the hard pink flesh of the doll almost as tall as me staring, I was the rare object of envy among my cousins. They couldn't believe that shiny foreign thing with the long yellow hair staring icy blue into nothingness belonged to me. I had never owned anything that tangible before, had made peace with the fate of the unfettered. That way I didn't have to be disappointed with the fact that no one had ever owned me. When my mother placed the burden of it in my arms, I didn't know what to do with its pointy fingers, so I pretended to love it. To please my mother, to belong to her expectant anticipation, I smiled like the doll smiled, grimacing my hesitation into an acceptable grin, chin nodding, signaling, yes, yes, mommy, I know how to yield to being owned. But then my mother went and spoiled it by saying something stupid to my uncle's wife, who then kicked me and my brother out, sent us reeling by bus to another city by ourselves. At 11, my brother was responsible at the window seat. Me, at 9, mostly giddy that my mother was finally being forced to take responsibility for never belonging to us, instead forcing us to only belong to ourselves. But when we arrived, she was all hard, plastic like the skin of the life-size doll she had brought me from Toronto, icy, cold like its blue stare, seeing nothing but still smiling, grimacing really. She would dump us in the most horrible homes in a week. In the aftermath of the second abandonment, I promised myself I would never play house with anyone again. If you couldn't reliably play house with your own mother, who else could be expected to chart the tentative walls of home with you? I would repeat this pattern in frequent intervals, nurse a longing to belong to all the girls I've loved before you, but always denied the desire to actually attach, only pretending just enough to seem like I belonged before I fled inside myself, forcing them to leave the empty gaze of me smiling empty at nothing. Back to back, serial monogamist, I practiced the art of looking like I belonged, and mostly it worked. For a year or so in stints, with hints and allegations of forever, always, but never feeling like I really belonged to anyone until you. You who loved the secret language of baby raccoons and squishy worms on the rocks. You who told me after only 1 week in your bed that you'd gladly follow me to Jamaica if that's where I was going to be. And for a year, you have been the traveler, living an hour off schedule, longing for Brooklyn all the time. You'd be in Kingston, flying back and forth to Akron and Jamaica and New York and Greece, and dragging me to see the Red Rocks, riddling the Grand Canyon, promising Paris to my daughter before we even hammer out the difficult details of how a culturally displaced Jamaican, lesbian, single mother by choice who had fallen out of love with New York could pull off playing house with a much younger, queer, child-free, loving her beautiful, just burgeoning Brooklyn life. Never mind that I just bought 70 acres of land to make an intentional community in Jamaica. Never mind how excited you were to finally have your own apartment on Eastern Parkway. We spent one evening circling the scent of each other in my backyard in Weeksville, and before I could decide it was too risky to fall in love with you, you put me on lockdown. You, who prefer your own company above any other, you agreed to come play house with me in a country where the food is spicier than you can tolerate. You dismissed my fears and followed me home. In rapid succession, you took me to Akron to meet your mother. We've successfully brokered a whole-ass life together, you and me, almost 1 year now, and I cannot imagine my breath devoid of you eating jerk pork and drinking cold water to cool your awkward tongue, turning 33 to an over-enunciated 33, if you only to embarrass me in front of the other Jamaicans indulging your practiced ill pronunciation. I'm beginning to think we might not be playing house, my love, risking the belief that this thing might be real, that what I feel about you negotiating the thorny corner of honoring your choice to be called child-free while building out the rules of being an umi to my earnest 10-year-old who has no patience for dolls either. Nothing of the future is promised, I know. But here and now, I promise to dream in hopes of a forever with you. I promise to carefully count the years between us in increments of empathy and understanding, to never take for granted how long I might get to love you, to hold the years we have already lived with gratitude. We may just be together long enough to mitigate the years I spent not belonging to anyone, the decades you languished in purgatory of the invulnerable. Today I acknowledge the good fortune that we found each other in a city steeped in the angst of the unbelonging. I feel so lucky to belong to you. Today, now, in this moment, we are magic and reality. Folded four-leaf clover and rabbit's foot, we are baby raccoons and squishy worms building a life together, reimagining the parameters of what home could look like when we choose it, when we choose each other against the odds, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for as long as we can, for as long as we choose.
Staceyann Chin. Thank you, everyone, for feeling the emotions with me right now. I'm speechless. She literally wrote, I saw her writing in the car. I'm grateful, both for your words and your vulnerability to share them with me and with people. Yes, I know, please. I don't have a corresponding poem to read for you. I feel very empty. But that's what I mean when I say she's the most human being, that like the whole spectrum of feelings and emotions that she's willing to bring to the forefront and bring to me and reminds me of what's possible and how to feel in the world. And I'm so grateful for the way you exploring home is spilling into invitations for me and for other people in this residency, the conversation you're having today and the conversation you're having in the next few days. I'm so proud of you and I'm so grateful.
You ready for the next question?
There's another question?
It's just a question. We prepared questions.
I'm sorry. Can I ask this isn't the Rachel show, this is the Staceyann show, even though this has turned into like a whole other show that I wasn't ready for. I thought, we'll talk about it later. You guys will hear my reply on social media.
It didn't start but anyways, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for making it okay to do it. All right, enough of that.
You just started reading. I thought it might have been the last thing, but we have more questions. Okay.
Shifting gears. Ready? You often talk about how Takia, stop feeding into it. How is everybody doing? All right, good.
I'm so happy for the particular people who are here right now. I know so many of you and some I don't, and the energy is so great. I'm so grateful for the very particular people who are sharing this space and emotion with me and us right now.
Yeah, it's a good, like, intimate little group, and all of you are so feely. I can feel all of your, like, you know, like, even if you're not a lesbian, I feel like it's a lesbian room of pheromones. It's like, you know, it's all so lesbian-y feely in the room. Like, people are just so fucking, like, juicy and, like, wet, like a lasagna. You didn't think I'd get that in there?
What is your question, Staceyann?
Okay, you often say, like, you're ashamed or disturbed by how happy you are when you land back in America.
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, I am a global citizen. I understand that America is not the center of the world. It's such a shit culture. They hate me. And then you're
Greene.
like, oh my God, I'm back in the U.S. Thank God, civilization. So do you want to say how it is that you kind of like are figuring, like talking about that, being a global citizen and still like understanding how America is such a like horrible
It is
big bully.
so
America's like
hard.
the Texas of the world.
Perhaps. Yeah. I do feel...
I love Texas, though, Austin.
I have like literal disappointment when I get here, and I'm just so happy with the conveniences that I have, and to get to my apartment, and like I said, to get Sweet Green, and that's like my thing, like Sweet Green and Starbucks. As soon as I land, I'm so happy about it. The cappuccino in the morning, like it's embarrassing how thrilled I am to be back home. And I also get really awkward when people are like, where are you from? And I'm like, America. And I'm like so embarrassed. It's a real feeling of embarrassment out in the world, particularly in the diaspora, where I know what is going to come to me when I relay that I'm American in whatever, whether it's about politics. I remember I was in Japan on the, like, moving towards Trump becoming president. And this little Japanese child, he was probably 7 or 8, and was like, look at you and your President Trump. And I was like, I know, I'm so, like, it's a stain. It feels like. So when I get back home, I often call Staceyann and tell her how angry I am about how happy I am to be back. And that has so much to do with conversations I've been having with my mom since it was her first trip. And she has, she's having all of these, when she was there, she kept mentioning things that since I'd been out of the country, I recognized that like not everyone has paved streets, not everyone has these, and they're surviving and thriving, like they're doing okay. It's not, we have this Western idea of what has to be in order for us to be well. And that hasn't been the truth for a lot of time. And so I think that I am still grappling with unlearning everything I understood about myself and about America in relation to the world. And I'm embarrassed about that. And so every time I'm confronted with this realization of feeling better here, it's just embarrassed. That's the only word I can think of is it's embarrassing.
Yeah. And I suppose being African American, because you kind of, that's been documented, that feeling of like, I'm not a whole citizen here, but then when I leave, I'm like part of the bully culture that America is in the world. Should we open it up to
we should to other
the
people's
audience now,
yes.
so that we can like get some conversation going? Because it's an interesting, I think this is an interesting place where we can talk about like what it means to be American here, whether you're immigrant or not, how living here makes you complicit.
Yeah, complicit. And what you said about not belonging. And I hate that I feel most like I belong in America, because this isn't where I want to belong. I talk about one of the reasons why I don't want to birth a child is I don't want to invite anyone here. Like, there's no one who I'd be like, you know what, come to America and have a black body, because I'd be the one birthing you, you'd be a brown body. Nothing in me.
Surrogate white child.
No. What? Take that off the record, please. but just this feeling of like, there's no person of color that I would invite and be like, you should come to America. So I'm not going to I would not birth a child here. It wouldn't be a welcome place, I believe. So yeah, there's a lot of feelings that I'm continuing. And even as much reading as I've done, as much thought as I've put into it, I still haven't gotten over the feeling that I have of being a bit ashamed of both being American, feeling most home in America, and not having anywhere else to feel at home, because my family is certainly a descendant of slaves, and I have no concept of where my family came from or where they were a part of off of plantations.
Mm. So while we take the first question, you want a little COVID here?
No, I don't. I knew you were going to make me share your water on stage. I knew it. Oh my God. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I just want to first say that I'm so moved by both of you, and it's such an honor to be in this space with all of you. And I'm wondering what belonging feels like to you. I know as someone who is a first-generation immigrant that it often feels like I've had to reject my South Asian identity, but also reject my American identity. And then it's sort of like, okay, what does that leave you with? And the idea of belonging is for me, it's more a feeling than an actual space. And it's one that I'm still very much coming to. And hearing from both of you has been moving to me and helping me cultivate what that looks like and feels like. And I'm wondering what that process has been like for you and what that feels like and looks like, the sense of belonging, whether it's to yourself or to a community, and also both, if that makes sense. I know that was sort of like a loaded general question.
I think that you have way more experience grappling with it.
I think that the world likes to categorize you, and that therein lies the first problem. You know, regardless of who we are deeply nuanced with regard to our identities. And there is no two Jamaicans that will be the same. And there are no two African Americans that will say, yes, I am this kind of person. And so a part of your kind of like early negotiations with belonging or choosing an identity or choosing a place called home or saying this is what I am is first having to peel off the labels that people stick upon your flesh. So they want to like cover you with tattoos, and every sticker wants to take up the biggest space on your body. And so I think for me, coming here, like I never realized how Jamaican I was until I was in America. And I never realized how different I was from the larger queer community until I walked into that white queer community with my Jamaican accent, with my immigrant experience. And I think over time, you begin to see all the ways in which you are different from people who you thought you were deeply similar to. And there comes a time when, you know, like I think that, you know, my grandmother lived until she was 94, and by the time she was 94, she would just lean to the side when she wanted to fart and just fart quite loudly and then just continue with the sentence without saying anything about it. And therein lies the freedom to not be concerned about people and their perceptions of you. And the older you get and the more you fight for it and the more you insist on your own boundaries to define yourself, is the more you can kind of just lean to the side and fart and not be concerned with what people think you are or what they need you to be. You know, because it, you know, like coming here, I wanted to fart in the car, in the lift.
She did.
And I really, really needed to fart. I was like,
Rachel, I need to fart. That's what she said to me.
And then,
I said, don't do it.
But because I knew that, you know, I knew I would never see this Lyft driver again. So So I really could just fart, and then he would just be like, oh my God, these people and their stinky farts, and then we would never see. But I was still bothered. Like, I didn't want him to think that I was just a person who just came into his car and farted and left. So I held on to my fart at the risk of being ill. Right? And then, they were in the green room with us, so I couldn't fart then either. So I had to wait, and then I had to like choose and be like, I'm gonna fart, and if they come back in and they smell it, I might just tell them it's Rachel, But I long for the time when that can be completely true. And I think now it's a little bit true. Like, I don't care who has opinions about who I'm partnered with, how I had my kid, where I'm living my life, whether I'm in America or in Jamaica, whether I bought my farm or I stole the farm, whether I slept with like George W. Bush to get the farm. I mean, like, whatever it is that people might think of me, it becomes less and less important when I become more certain of who I am and how I want to live in the world. And so I would say, for the next however long you can, I would say lean into really trying to figure out, who do I want to be, and less of what they need me to be. Because the minute you start looking to your own desire, is the more easily you find yourself able to defend the choice you make, because the choice you make would have been deeply considered and deeply fought for and deeply thought through. But it's only when you make these careless decisions about like, yeah, I want to do this thing, and then somebody says, why are you doing this thing? And you're like, well, I don't really know. But if you really consider it and you come to this truth of who you are, and that like, I have to do it. And then they come over and be like, why are you doing it? Because I want to, motherfucker. Because I can. Because I work a shit job so that I can like buy these shoes, so that I can live in a neighborhood that has a house with some light, regardless of what you think of, like, so that I work hard. I work on myself hard enough to make these choices, to consider them, and to make them regardless of your gaze.
And I think that when you start making decisions about what your values are, what your intentions are, how you want to live, you will attract people who affirm and who celebrate and who are excited to be that with you based on your own decision, not looking to fit into those things.
Yeah.
How we got to farts, I don't know, but I hope your question was answered.
It was relevant, right? The threads were connected. Hater.
Anything else?
Any questions? I mean, don't feel pressed. Oh, God.
I'm still crying about the poem. I thought it was going to lead into like a big ceremony. I was like, whoa.
I thought you were going to propose.
I thought you were going to propose. I was stressed.
I was waiting for it. Maybe it's coming at the end, so everybody don't go rush off. How, before you got to Jamaica, something that I continue to struggle with is there's so much to contribute to the fight here. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to contribute to the fight in your own country. How did you reconcile, how did you manage the time that you contributed to the fight in Jamaica versus the fight in the US? How do you manage that activist time? Because there's only so many hours in the day, but you still want your country to be better. You still want the country that you now exist in to be better. How did you manage that?
I think I'd like to believe that, one, I'm doing both. But you're right, you can't do them at the same time. I had the particularly beautiful experience of spending 24 years in Jamaica before I moved here, and then spending 24 years here. So it kind of felt like I've given equal time to both, so now it's time to bop back. And if you widen your lenses a bit, if you look at C.L.R. James and the Black Jacobins, if you look at the relationships between, the anti-slavery activists in the Caribbean, and you can connect it with if you connect the civil rights movement with the earliest, anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, with the freedom of places like Zimbabwe, the kind of like movement away from the from Britain and, Europe as, ruling countries, you can see that the best parts of being an activist is being connected across borders. Like there have never been activists who are isolated from activists in other countries. The literature travels, the bodies travel, the ideologies travel. There's no movement that is in isolation. And so you have the freedom to choose where might be better for your body or better for your creativity or better, which is why, I believe deeply in the dissolving of these hard borders between countries. Like a part of this closing of borders is also locking down ideologies. It's the reason they don't want the ideologies of Cuba to come to the US. It's the reason Russia doesn't want the ideas that are, kind of like robust here in the West to be in Russia. You know what I mean? It's so I believe that moving my body across the borders and participating in the different conversations, being in Jamaica has allowed me to remember that the LGBT struggle is not just about getting married or getting, the same rights as heteronormative couples. That there are other struggles that are attached to being LGBT, that there are other struggles, that there are other feminist struggles that are not about, who gets put on the Pride March or who gets, to speak, at these big feminist marches every year, that it is about like women and children who are consistently without food, without water, that it's about land and it's about, what climate change is doing to the poorest communities on the planet, that it's a deeply connected conversation about how the global activist movement has to be attached to itself from every corner of the earth, because until all of us are free, none of us is free.
I love it.
Yes.
Hi. I'm very happy to meet you guys.
I'm so happy to.
Hi, everyone. So my question is, what are some of the practices that you guys do to stay grounded in the midst of the cognitive dissonance? That's like a big thing in my life. Like I want the softness, but I have such a hard time letting go of my identity in the struggle and in the harshness of growing up in life.
You in the middle of that one right now.
I am in the middle of it. And I think that what I had to do was recognize the breadth of the work, the way that I really think back to the Black Panther Party, and I make considerations how the women who were making breakfast for the kids were doing the work as much as the people who were guns in hand standing to make a statement against the police, that both of them were absolutely necessary parts of the work. And so people, I'm assuming, were showing up in the ways that they could when they could. And so a lot of my considerations about how I show up and when I show up is with that recognition that however I'm showing up is just as valid and important as what people are expecting or needing me to do. If anyone's familiar with my work, a lot of my earlier work in anti-racism was really rooted in rage, in like an intense rage that manifested in my communication, that manifested in the intensity in which I was engaging with the white people who were learning from me. And with 2020, it just unraveled me in many ways to where I couldn't show up that way. And I also didn't want to. And I would call my friend Ebony Janice and be like, girl, I'm about to get off social media for 2 weeks. Can you just verbally remind me that you'll be there? Can you just verbally remind me that the things that I feel like I'm dropping the ball on, there's actually lots of people I know and who I don't know, who I see and who I don't see, who are doing this work as well. And so it's a reminder that it's not my job to save the world, that what I contribute is enough. And also there's other ways to contribute. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to do work in the lane of my foundation, where we're providing therapy for Black women and girls. That also is as much of the work as me doing DEI work in a setting of a corporate arena. Me having a bookstore that has no cis white men on the shelves is me doing the same work as me writing, you know, an essay that speaks to a particular racial moment in the country at the time. So just giving myself the space to recognize that every single aspect of the work matters, and there's going to be ebbs and flows to how you show up. I'm sure at some point that rage will come to me again in a way that I will show up perhaps in the same way I have, but maybe in a different way that infuses or meets a need that wasn't existing right here, right now. I'm sure whiteness is going to give me many opportunities to show up and do this work. And community is a big one, because like I said, calling my friends or just knowing that the feeling that other people are out there doing it. Not that I thought that I was the one who was saving it, but you feel like you're dropping the ball. Like, I should be doing this. I have to be doing this. So reminding.
Or you feel like you're alone, which is the center of it. Like, I'm out here alone doing it. So if I don't do it, it's never going to get done.
Yeah, and especially social media is like such a warped fucking place. And so it feels both isolating and incredibly vulnerable. Like, everyone can see me and no one understands what's happening behind my screen, behind, you know, what's happening outside of what they're seeing behind my handle. So I think that take some time to consider the way you're doing work, because also, I don't know, but let's say you're a mother, you resting and feeling good and caring for your child of color is to the work. You know, being able to have the capacity to show up in your office space and fortify the other people of color in the space, that also is the work. So don't underestimate the ways you are still showing up, even though your identity is rooted in kind of this gnarly struggle that we find value in, which is probably also rooted in a Western idea that the more exhausted you are, the better you're doing, or the more exhausted you are, the more value you bring to a space. And that absolutely isn't the case. So it takes a lot of unlearning and shape-shifting of our perception of what good work is, because capitalism and Western culture really convinces us that you've done your best once you've died. I have a banner in my living room that says, I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. Like, I need it now, actually. Like, when I'm dead, it won't matter, and I need it right now, so I'm going to take it right now in the ways that I can and offer it to other people in the ways that I can, too. Yeah.
What time is it? 8:28. We have time for one more question. Yes.
Yeah.
No, they're coming with the microphone, because they're
on it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to both say thanks to both of you. You're both incredible. Let me start there. Staceyann, I want to find out if you ever got to the GOAT.
Jeffrey.
Oh, yes, for the farm, yes.
Yeah, and I also want to find out what was the inspiration behind going to Jamaica, going back home, and opening up a farm. As I see your videos on Instagram, I see the community really hard at work there, and see the way that you and Zuri are building with the community there. What was the inspiration behind that? And what is it you want to continue from here on out?
Well, girl, am I misgendering you? Okay. You know, when you make an assumption, you have to check. In the middle of the pandemic, you know, I signed a contract just before the pandemic started, and then all my gigs got canceled and I couldn't make the down payment, and it was just like a shit show. And, you know, I worked really hard and like kept the house and renovated it during the pandemic, and the backyard became a gathering space for people to come strip doors and pull up floorboards and put down pavement. I mean, look, whatever I've done in my life, it's always been about community. So when I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, the people would come and just be sexy. You know, everybody would know that there was food and wine and beautiful women, you know, at 919 Park Place, apartment 4B, in my all through my 20s and early 30s. Every Friday and every Saturday night, if you could get to Brooklyn and find the lesbians there would be a good time. A good time would be had by all. And then I had the kid and moved into like a 2-bedroom, and so now it was like, okay, you have to come a little earlier. And then we couldn't party so loudly because the kid was asleep in the bedroom in the back. And when I got this house and the pandemic made everything shut down, then everyone knew that, okay, there's an outside space in Weeksville. Staceyann had just bought a house, so you could come and hang out and bring food and pretend to be real butch by chopping down a tree or some shit. And then the winter came, and the pandemic was at its height, raging, and people were dying in New York City, and there was ambulance outside and the sirens, and every time you talk to somebody, I lost my agent, and I lost my cousin, and I lost friends, and people were just like dying, and then I said, I gotta get out of here because, you know, the winter came and drove us inside, and then people couldn't come over anymore, and then there was the dust of the renovation happening, the half renovation, because I could only afford to do half of it. And then I said to myself, I've got to at least go somewhere. And my friend said, why don't you just come to Jamaica? And I said, I don't have money to come to Jamaica to pay for all I need to pay for. And my friend said, come home and be in my house. I will buy food and you can stay for 2 weeks or longer if you want. And we bought a ticket for 2 weeks to go to Jamaica, and that was 1.5 years ago. And, I've been back for work, but the center of life has been there's a reason school. And then, I was like, since I'm here, I might as well figure out how to make community here. And then I acquired the land in Point Hill in St. Catherine. And it looks good on social media, but it's a lot of work, and I'm way behind the curve of learning how to really build community. I don't understand all the aspects of like what is necessary for community building, but I'm working with like groups like We Change, talking to people from JFlag. I mean, working with different groups who already know how to do that, and learning from them, unlearning some of the ways in which activism works here, and trying to figure out what it looks like in a place like Jamaica, in proximity to bodies who have been there long before I was there, me coming with my, kind of American self with a little bit of like, buzz around me. Everybody's excited about it. But I still know that I have to learn from the people who are around me, that I have to take my cues, and also from the village, because this is a very like rural, kind of like close-knit village in Jamaica that they have their own ideas of how things should be. And I can't just come in and be like, well, you can't just talk about trans people like this, or you can't just talk about gay people like this. I have to like come in and like broker the conversation and not get all upset when they misgender people or they call people by the wrong name, or they ask me shit like, so who's the man? I have to be like, well, let me tell you about, how we think about it, and even if it looks this way to you. Like, I have had to answer some of the most basic questions about sexuality and about our relationship. I don't tell you everything.
Thank you.
But it's a learning experience, and it's 70 acres that we're trying to make into a kind of shared space where people will visit and learn about how to cultivate things and how to be together and learn about the culture of Jamaican people and have relationships with the people who live in this community. It's a beautiful, space high up on a hill. The views are astounding. Yeah. The land is beautiful. It's in a very hot country. At night it gets cool, very cool up there and beautiful. I mean, I feel quite lucky, but I also feel quite overwhelmed. But I'm like, being overwhelmed don't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means you should like get some people to do it with you. So, all of you who are in the room who want to be involved, you should reach out and help us. I mean, we need sheets for the beds that just got in. We have like
Staceyann bought 6 bunk beds so that people like really could come and be in community there and help build out things. There's the chicken coop. There's Jeffrey the goat who did get got. We need, and the community around us, we're trying to do like a health fair so that there's almost no like medical, avenue for people to take care of like the most basic things, like just basic antibiotics, and girls need like pads, soap, food is like an issue, like getting to school, like computers for the children who are sometimes online, buying uniforms, books, pencils. We got offered a yurt, but we don't know how to get it from London because the person who's giving us the yurt is in London, so we need help getting that there. I don't know. People. Somebody wants to give us a I don't even know how to say it, but it's like a network of tents where people can come and camp. But that's in Iowa. It's hard to get stuff to.
It's hard to
island.
get. So when you come, we're begging you to bring a suitcase, bring stuff with you for us, like corned beef, sardines, like anything that will help to feed the community. Water boots for people to, those rubber work boots that you can walk around and work in, gloves, zinc.
And yourselves to come.
Yeah, I mean, we need all kinds of stuff, and we also need hands. We also need company, like people to come and play a guitar and diffuse arguments between myself and other people. Yeah, but it's called Kindred on the Rock, and you can find us online. Kindred on the Rock is, kindred as in like tribe on the rock. We call Jamaica the Rock. So come and see it and all that. I want to say thank you to Christina and Jennifer and Candice, who's going to be here later this week. I want to say thank you to the people who have put money and effort behind this. Oh, this is you? Look at you. You're looking so sexy to me now in this moment because you have afforded the space for us. Deeply grateful, for people who have resources to put their money where they say their politics lie. It's not that common. So I'm grateful, and I'm grateful to my love for being open and honest and present for the conversation with me. Every day I learn from you. Every day I become sure about what home might look like for me, for my kid, for my community. It's been a year, but like it feels like we just started yesterday. It's been so good, and like I'm so 100% in still, which is not the norm. I'm excited about like what's to come, and I know that we'll expand and we'll grow and things will shift and change, and the only thing I can say is that I'm absolutely certain that we'll remain in conversation and that we'll always look for what's best for the other person. I'm so grateful for you, so grateful. I lucked out 100% when you picked up my DMs, which was not what it sounds like. She slid in my DMs. I asked her a work question. Jeez.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and thank you for coming out and for being here and for being so that we could be present and open and not too shy about
our first time on stage together.
Our first time on stage together, because I was so fucking nervous.
She was so nervous all day today. She was so hilariously nervous in a way I would have never expected. She was like, her armpits were sweaty. She was like jumping up and down, like getting energy out. It was so cute. And your new hair looks great. The new hair color.
Thank you.
Anyways, thank you, everyone.